My husband slammed his hand on the marble countertop, his eyes flashing with an entitlement that turned my blood cold. "Hand my dad the keys, Emma. It's his house now. Stop being selfish and do what you're told." His father stood right behind him, a smug, greedy grin plastered across his face as he already started marking which rooms belonged to his extended family. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought a quiet woman would just fold under pressure. But they completely forgot who actually signed the deed to this place. I took a deep breath, looked my father-in-law dead in the eye, and smiled. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just calmly uttered one single sentence. The moment the words left my mouth, my father-in-law's smug smile vanished and his face turned entirely pale. Follow my story until the end to find out what happened, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Emma Walker. I am 40 years old, and if the last 2 decades of my life taught me anything, it is that peace is something you earn with blood, sweat, and absolute silence. For 20 years, I poured every ounce of my energy into building a career, working late nights, and saving every penny I could. I thought I was building a future with a partner who valued that dedication. When I married Julian, he seemed like a man who admired my drive. He was gentle, soft-spoken, and always echoed my dreams of one day owning a peaceful sanctuary, a place we could truly call our own. But as the years crept by, the mask began to slip. Julian's support turned into a quiet, simmering entitlement, heavily fueled by his overbearing father, Arthur. To Julian, my hard work wasn't a shared triumph. It was a resource to be managed by his family. The breaking point arrived when my parents passed away, leaving me a generous inheritance. Combined with my 20 years of savings, I finally bought our dream home free and clear. It was supposed to be my ultimate sanctuary, a testament to survival and love. Instead, the moment the papers were finalized, Julian didn't see my achievement. He saw an asset, a grand stage to elevate his family's social standing and satisfy his father's relentless greed. The paint was barely dry on the living room walls when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, my father-in-law, Arthur, stood on the porch with a smug grin that instantly made my stomach turn. He hadn't even been invited, yet he crossed the threshold before I could even greet him, pulling off his coat as if he owned the place. He claimed it was just a casual housewarming visit, a sudden burst of paternal pride. But the moment his boots hit my hardwood floors, the entire atmosphere shifted. Arthur didn't walk through the house like a guest. He walked through it like a health inspector, running his fingers along the doorframes and critiquing the architecture. "The layout is a bit tight, Emma," he remarked, his voice dripping with passive-aggressive condescension as he eyed the spacious living room. "But I suppose for someone of your background, this feels like a palace. You got lucky." Julian immediately scrambled to his father's side, his demeanor shifting into something painfully subservient. He began nodding eagerly at every single critique Arthur made, constantly seeking the old man's approval like a loyal lieutenant desperate for a promotion. As I stood back and watched them, I noticed a tense, silent communication passing between my husband and his father. It was a series of knowing nods and subtle shifts in posture, a secret language perfected over decades. My blood ran cold as the realization hit me. This wasn't a surprise visit at all. A hidden agenda was already in motion, and they believed I was completely blind to it. Arthur didn't waste any time. He marched up the stairs, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hallways as he began opening doors. I followed closely behind, my hands tightening into fists, as I watched him aggressively assign specific bedrooms to Julian's siblings and extended cousins. "Michael can take the master suite on the east wing," Arthur declared loudly, completely ignoring my presence as if I were a ghost in my own home. And this smaller room will be perfect for your aunt when she visits from Chicago. Julian was right behind him, boldly backing his father up with a terrifying lack of shame. Of course, Dad. Family sticks together. Emma has plenty of space to share. She won't mind making a few sacrifices for the sake of the bloodline. The confrontation reached its absolute peak when we finally walked back down into the kitchen. The tension in the room was suffocating, creating a high-stakes moment where the heavy emotional weight of my 20 years of hard work clashed directly against their pure, unchecked greed. Standing right there by the marble countertop, Julian looked at me with a cold, commanding authority I had never seen before. The gentle husband I thought I knew had completely vanished, replaced by an entitled stranger who firmly believed he had the upper hand. He stretched out his palm toward me, his voice dropping into a demanding, unyielding tone. "Hand my dad the keys, Emma," he barked, completely overstepping every legal boundary and assuming total ownership of my sanctuary. They truly believed I was cornered, trapped by my own politeness, but they had absolutely no idea that their elaborate game was about to come to a crashing halt. I stood perfectly still in the center of the kitchen, maintaining absolute composure. I refused to give them the desperate emotional reaction they were so clearly begging for. Julian's hand remained extended, and Arthur's smug smile widened, both of them fully expecting me to burst into tears or start an empty argument. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate breath, looked my father-in-law dead in his greedy eyes, and let a calm smile spread across my face. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight. I just quietly delivered the single crushing sentence that legally disarmed them both. "I'm glad you love the layout, Arthur, but the irrevocable trust my parents established mandates that if Julian's family ever attempts to reside here, the property immediately transfers to a private estate, and you will both be sued for trespassing." The words cut through the room like a razor blade. The moment the sentence left my mouth, Arthur's smug, triumphant smile completely vanished, and the color drained from his face until he turned entirely pale. He staggered back slightly against the counter, his mouth opening and closing as the harsh, terrifying reality of their powerless legal position violently sank in. Julian's extended hand dropped to his side, his eyes wide with shock, as he realized their months of careful planning had just hit a concrete wall. The immediate, stunned silence in the kitchen was absolutely deafening as the entire balance of power shifted completely into my hands. The deafening silence in the kitchen didn't last long, but the moment they left my house that afternoon, the atmosphere changed completely. I knew that one sentence wouldn't stop men driven by desperate greed, so I immediately took action. That very night, while Julian was asleep, I sat in the glow of my laptop screen and began digging through his personal financial documents, cloud backups, and digital history. What I uncovered was a calculated nightmare that turned my blood cold. Julian and his father hadn't just gotten greedy on a whim. They had been actively plotting a hostile takeover of my life for months. Deep within a hidden digital folder, I discovered a series of detailed email exchanges between Julian, Arthur, and a shady real estate attorney. They were planning to use high-pressure tactics to force me into signing what I thought would be standard joint occupancy paperwork. In reality, the documents were structured to quietly transfer the property deed under a shell entity controlled entirely by Arthur. The reason for their desperation was laid bare in black and white. Arthur had accumulated massive, crushing debts from failed commercial ventures, and his creditors were closing in. They saw my hard work and my parents' inheritance as their personal get-out-of-jail-free card. The most devastating part was reading Julian's own words to his father, completely underestimating my intelligence, stating that I was too submissive to ever look at the fine print. That absolute betrayal changed everything. I transitioned instantly from a hurting wife to a woman executing absolute justice. I didn't waste a single second crying over the ashes of my marriage. The very next morning, I took the incriminating emails and financial records straight to a high-profile asset protection attorney. Armed with irrefutable proof of their attempted fraud, my legal counsel moved with terrifying efficiency. We quietly executed the final, restrictive clauses of the property trust, locking down every single asset. 2 days later, while Julian was sitting on the sofa watching television, a process server knocked on the door. Julian was formally served with divorce papers, a strict restraining order, and an immediate eviction notice giving him exactly 2 hours to pack his clothes and leave my property permanently. Arthur received his own legal package at the exact same time. Our legal team forwarded the evidence of his fraudulent schemes to his primary creditors and corporate regulators. Faced with absolute legal ruin and completely cut off from the wealth they had tried to steal, their house of cards collapsed spectacularly. Arthur's remaining assets were seized by the bank, forcing him into a humiliating public bankruptcy. Julian, stripped of the lifestyle he had tried to weaponize against me, quickly realized he had lost absolutely everything. Without my income or his father's backing, he was forced to move into a tiny, cramped apartment, entirely broke and facing the crushing consequences of his own entitlement. They wanted to destroy my peace, but in the end, their own unchecked greed ensured they destroyed themselves. 3 months have passed since the dust settled, and my home has finally become the quiet sanctuary I always dreamed it would be. The air feels lighter now, completely free from the toxic manipulation and heavy entitlement that used to fill every room. I spend my mornings sitting by the kitchen counter, drinking coffee in absolute peace, knowing that every single square inch of this property belongs to me and me alone. This experience forced me to undergo a massive journey of self-discovery, stepping out from the shadow of a dishonest marriage and fully reclaiming my true independence. But I knew I couldn't just sit back and enjoy my wealth. I wanted to ensure my survival served a greater purpose. Using a portion of my parents' inheritance, I officially established a foundation dedicated to helping other women recognize, fight, and protect themselves from severe financial abuse and familial manipulation. It is empowering work, satisfying in a way that trying to please an ungrateful family never could be. I am finally accountable to no one but myself. Now, I am incredibly curious about all of you who have followed my journey until the very end. What would you have done if you were standing in my kitchen, facing that level of greed? Have you ever had to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to love you? Comment below and let me know. Meanwhile, I am leaving 2 other incredible stories on the final screen that are absolute channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching.